All right, so hey, we teased it enough. Let's kick it over to our interview. First time on the show, Dudley Dawson, longtime Arkansas Razorback insider. Hogs, you're going to love this one. All right, we're pleased to be joined by the first time by Mr. Dudley Dawson. Of course, you know him. He's been covering the Arkansas Razorbacks for over 3 decades. You got to give him a follow on Twitter at Deed Sports, and he covers the Razorbacks now for hogville.net, fearlessfriday.com, and Pig Trail Nation. Dudley, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Glad to do it, man.
Now, let me ask you, because this is a hot topic, and I love to get people like you, insiders that know these programs better than anybody. It certainly looks like we're going away from the division format in the SEC, and we're likely going to the pod system. This is a perfect off-season question for you, Dudley. If we go to the pods in the SEC, and let's say it's the 4 teams per pod, like we kind of assume it's going to go, who are the other teams you'd like to see Arkansas in the same group as?
Well, I think most Arkansas fans, and certainly when it started being mentioned, that everybody was tossing after names, but I think most people would like to have Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M in that same pod. Kind of a little Southwest Conference reunion or wherever there in Oklahoma. But they have had some really good rivalries over the years with LSU, Ole Miss, some others. So it'll be interesting to see the way they go. But just from a coverage standpoint, I would like to see, Oklahoma and Texas and Texas A&M in there. But they've got a chore ahead of them because it's going to be a really interesting schedule. And as we wait to see whether, Texas and Oklahoma make the move in 2023 when the big, whatever they're going to call it now, 8, 12, 14, whatever, gets their new teams in and starts making up a schedule. So we'll see how it plays itself out. I really doubt that they'll wait till 2025, 2026 to get this going. So, I'm sure somebody's going to pay some money and those 2 teams are going to be extracted sooner than later.
And speaking of Texas, just how great was that atmosphere for that game? And, I guess just not living in that state, I kind of, I had seen all the hype with the fans getting ready to play the Longhorns again and that old rivalry from the Southwest days. But, man, it just blew my mind just how that whole Saturday went out and storming the field. Just how great of a scene was that for the Razorbacks?
It was certainly, it's no secret that Arkansas's football program has been down for almost a decade until Coach Sam Pittman came in here and kind of revived things. And they were 3-7 his first year, which, doesn't sound great, but they certainly were far more competitive than they had been in the previous years under Chad Morris when they won 4 games total. And we're riding along SEC losing streak. But when that game popped up on the schedule, and it was one that Texas had been avoiding for quite a while. It was scheduled to be played 4 or 5 years earlier than that, but Texas kept finding a reason not to return the game after Arkansas had gone down there. But then it was not only was it a great atmosphere, that the fans were excited. Many of the older generation that I'm from, grew up hating the Longhorns because that was just the thing you did here in the state, because they were the big bully in the Southwest Conference and kind of doing things whatever the way they wanted and not really worrying about everybody else. And so there was a lot of heat, from the old fans. The young fans were excited about, being competitive again and relative. And then that atmosphere was just electric because of all those factors going into it. And Arkansas came out and played really well. And once again, we found out that Texas was not back, even though that's their saying all the time. Texas, I guess, did pretty well after they left Arkansas for the next few games, and then went on that big losing streak down the way. So it's interesting, and I think people are excited about Oklahoma and Texas coming into the league. That being said, though, Arkansas has developed so many great rivalries in the different sports with all their SEC brethren, and they would never want to go back to a Southwest Conference type situation. They're very happy to be in the SEC, and now the SEC brings a little of the Southwest Conference to them, so you're kind of getting the best of both worlds.
Now, you mentioned the upswing under Sam Pittman. The key to sustaining that success, though, particularly in the SEC, is getting better in recruiting. And, man, have they hit the nail on the head there so far in this class, depending on, what rankings you're looking at. 24/7 Sports Composites got Arkansas as the number 6 recruiting class in the country. I believe that's number 2 in the SEC currently. Does that surprise you at all that Arkansas is just doing so well in recruiting so far this cycle?
A little bit, but they have a really good staff that he's put together. He's made a couple of adjustments each of the last 2 years for guys he didn't think was recruiting well enough, and those 4 guys that have come on since he first got here have all done a great job in recruiting their positions. The interesting thing is of their 12 commitments right now, the 7 of them were at that Texas game. They made a big deal of that weekend, and those kids got to come see that the atmosphere and got to see Arkansas play well, and obviously the season went really well as well with 9-4 and winning a New Year's Day bowl against Penn State. So that kind of that Texas game kind of played into some of the success they're having recruiting as well, because they got to showcase the program after many years of maybe not wanting to bring the guys in here during the games themselves. Now they want to do that again, and it certainly worked with that Texas game, and they've been off, as you said, to a great start in recruiting, and we'll see how it continues to play itself out. But I think they've got really good thing going here. One thing that Coach Pittman came in and did was basically the guys that were here that were just playing and had got used to losing were quickly eradicated from the program, and the culture changed almost automatically overnight.
Now, is it too much to ask for Arkansas to be even better rushing the football? I believe they, by any statistical measure, they led the SEC in rushing last year, but of course they're bringing back KJ Jefferson. Dominique Johnson was outstanding. Rocket Sanders starting to emerge. They're bringing back a very veteran offensive line with multi-year starters on that group. Is it too much to expect Arkansas to be even better on the ground this season?
I don't think so. And I was talking to Kendall Brawls for an article yesterday, the Arkansas offensive coordinator, and he made it clear something that many of us thinking is that the running back room is the strength of this team. Not only the guys that you mentioned, but A.J. Green is a speedster. They've got 2 freshmen that have come in Rashawn Dominion out of Georgia, James Joyner out of Little Rock Parkview, that have that they're excited about. They went through spring practice. They were early enrollees, and they were excited about them. And Javion Hunt is another kid 2 years ago that they got. So they feel like they're 5 deep at running back. And Rocket Sanders is the alpha male in the room. He's going to be the starter. He's going to get the heaviest workload of those backs. But they not only feel good about the talent they have there, but the depth they have there. An injury or two won't cripple it as much as maybe it would have in previous years.
Mm-hmm. Now, anytime I bring up the Razorbacks, though, people say, well, who are they going to throw the ball to? Of course, the great Treylon Burks just became a first-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. That's that guy's just irreplaceable. He was that good. How confident is this coaching staff in the receivers they got on the roster?
Well, I would say that is maybe one of the areas that they have the biggest question marks. They have a lot of guys who have played a lot of snaps. Many of them were young last year. None of them that were as consistent as Treylon was. I mean, he's a fantastic receiver, and that's why he's going to be a Tennessee Titan, next season and all that. But I do think they have some talent there. They certainly have some speed. It's just going to be consistency and day in, day out, catching the ball, running the right routes. It did help them that they got a former 5-star named Jaden Hasselwood from Oklahoma. He was injured a little bit this spring, and so you didn't get to see him fully work with the quarterbacks. But really one of the more dynamic playmakers, Malik Hornsby, who's the backup quarterback, is also going to be one of the top wide receivers this year. And the reason they can do that is because they got Cade Fortin, who a preferred walk-on, who was the starting quarterback at South Florida and also played at North Carolina, has a lot of snaps under his belt. So they feel like they can use Malik Hornsby in that situation and be able to get some dynamic plays from him. I think he's the fastest guy on the team, and so they're going to do a lot to get the ball in his hands, even as he sits at the number two quarterback position.
Mm-hmm. Now, last year that defense was led by that linebacking crew. You got so many standouts. Now, of course, Bumper Poole is returning, but there's a big hole next to him until they went out and got Drew Sanders from Alabama, and Sam Pittman seems to be raving about the Drew Sanders. Do you think he's going to live up to the hype, and could he potentially be, that next star linebacker for the Razorbacks?
Well, the interesting thing, Hayden Henry, Grant Morgan, and Bumper Poole, who have played the vast majority of the linebacker snaps the last 2 or 3 years, don't really look like your prototypical linebacker. Drew Sanders does. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. He's very fast. That was maybe their biggest defensive pickup of the offseason, even though they got several others in the fact of what he brings to the table. He is a guy that's, for a lot of he started 3 games at Alabama last year, really came off as a rush edge guy more than anything else. But they love him up here. They think he's going to get a lot of snaps. And then they've got 3 freshman linebackers, all who are early enrollees, that they feel, are going to be able to add some depth there. They've also got some guys returning as well that played some snaps last year. So they're feeling really good about that position. And that's a position that really they have, the staffs over the past decade have missed in terms of getting, the right linebackers and getting enough depth and all that. And they feel really good about that. And I know also talked with the defense coordinator, Barry Odom, and he's excited. Even though he lost a lot of starters, he brings back a lot of people that played a lot of snaps and have developed over the course of the offseason. At least that's what he believes.
Mm-hmm. And kind of, what about the defensive line? Similar to the receiver question, that's an issue on that roster. They brought in several transfers. This is 2 years in a row now. The Razorbacks have brought in transfers to shore up the defensive line. How's that group looking? And do you think they'll continue to try to look to add a guy or two on that defensive line?
Yeah, Coach Pittman has mentioned that, and he did again yesterday. He was at a Houston Razorback Club meeting and mentioned that he would still wanted to sign one other defensive lineman that he wants to bring in here certainly as a rotational piece. Isaiah Nichols is a guy who's been here. It was a high school star here in the state of Arkansas, actually 5 minutes away from my house here. And he has really, it appears, come into his own. He's going to be the bell cow down there in the middle. But they have really gone out. Landon Jackson from LSU, Jordan Dominique from Georgia Tech. You just got a transfer named Terry Hampton, who's an Arkansas guy that played at Arkansas State. So they've added some rotational pieces there. The key is going to be, can they get enough pressure off the edge? That's one of the things that, they're really hoping that through these additions that they'll be able to do. I think that was if they had any setback last year, other than a couple of injuries, obviously to Jalen Catalon, being the biggest, I think it was the fact that they just didn't get enough pressure on the quarterbacks. And that, that really had the secondary really, traveling to make a lot of plays and all that. I think they feel like they've got more pressure to come this year. I think they're going to use some different sets and stuff that to try to bring some surprise stunts and different things like that. But I do think that that's probably the biggest question on defense, being the pressure that they can put on the quarterbacks and kind of help out that secondary and the linebackers.
Now, I don't know if you've seen this, Dudley, but our friends over at the WinBet Casino out of Las Vegas, they set the first over-under win totals for every team in the SEC. I almost fell out of my chair when they set this number for the Razorbacks. 6.5 wins for this upcoming season. Now, maybe that's perfect. Maybe that's right where Sam Pittman and company want them, because they're going to play that disrespect card. But what do you think on that one, Dudley? 6.5 wins for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Are you more confident over or under that number?
I'm just being able to watch this team through spring practice, and Coach Pittman did a really good thing, and he let us watch the full practices, which is not kind of a thing in the SEC and around college football anymore. And even though they had some guys that were injured, I really think this team has the chance to be as good as it was last year, if not better. And you look back at some of the games that they probably should have won. They probably should have beat Auburn. They've got an intense non-conference schedule, starting off with Cincinnati, the former college Final Four team last year. Although they lost 30 seniors to some good guys, they're still going to be pretty good. BYU, is an away game at BYU is going to be a challenge as well. But I do really feel like that the culture and what they brought in terms of replacing the guys that have gone out, many of whom were super seniors, is going to put them in a position to be better on both sides of the football than they were last year. And obviously on the offensive side, that starts with the KJ Jefferson and those running backs. But defensively, I think there's a lot more talent throughout, and you won't have to worry so much about an injury, or you won't have to worry about your linebackers playing 70 to 80 snaps a game, which has been a thing around here a lot that, has really, in terms of late in games that Arkansas has had trouble overcoming in the losses it had.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dudley, I really appreciate all your time. Just got one more question for you. Last season was all about snapping streaks. They beat A&M. They beat LSU. They beat Missouri. But there's one streak remaining on this annual schedule, and that is, of course, Alabama Crimson Tide. And trust me, Dudley, I'm a Tennessee graduate, so I know all about getting my head kicked in by the Crimson Tide here. But come October 1st, the Crimson Tide come to Fayetteville. The off season's a time for hot takes and all this, so I won't hold it against you. We're months and months and months away from that game. But what % chance do you give Arkansas, knowing what you know about them now, to pull that upset, beat Alabama in Fayetteville come Saturday, October 1st?
Well, it would be silly, I think, for me to predict a win since that losing streak has gone, so far. But I guess if I was going to put a percentage on it, I'd probably put it at 40%. The one thing that I do know is the gap between Alabama and Arkansas has been cut basically in half. I think, they weren't competitive there for a couple of years. Jerry Jones' grandson, John Stephen Jones, had to start at quarterback down there at Alabama one time for Arkansas. But they are in a position now to where you can legitimately think it's going to be a competitive game, and if a few things go right, then Arkansas has a chance to win. But again, it would be foolish. It'd be like me as a Dallas Cowboy fan sitting here and predicting the Super Bowl win. Now I can always be, think that we're getting closer and it might happen, but history. You got to know your history. Alabama's still going to be a very good team. Obviously they don't have Georgia on the schedule. Arkansas doesn't have Georgia on the schedule this year. That's it's a kind of a win-win thing for them. But I do think they're going to be competitive against Alabama, but I can't sit here and say that's a definite win.
All right, hey, once again, I appreciate you. Dudley Dawson, give him a follow at Deed Sports and check out all his work at hogville.net, fearlessfriday.com, and Pig Trail Nation. Thank you again. This was outstanding.
No problem, man. Anytime.
All right, so just want to say thanks again to Dudley for joining the show. Really appreciate him coming on. We'll have to have him back on. Just the incredible insight there he provided on the Arkansas Razorbacks. I give as much info as I can, but we got to reach out to guys like this to give you some even more in-depth inside info on these teams all across the SEC. I'm working hard to line up one more guest, very unique, very entertaining guy. We kind of been playing phone tag all week, so I hope to have him on Friday's show. We'll see how that goes, and hope to have Cousin Shane back on the show before you know it. Again, we've got some terrific ideas. One that I think you guys are really, really, really going to love, and no one else is doing this content that we've got pulled up our sleeves. So hopefully, thoughts and prayers to Shane. Hopefully he can make it back as soon as he can. But hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you, as always, for tuning in. And if you made it this far, if you haven't already, give us that 5-star written review on the Apple Podcast app. And if you're not an Apple product person, hey, give us that review on Spotify. We'll take Spotify reviews too. Android's got Spotify as far as I know. So get us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, and email those to thatsecpodcast@gmail.com for a free beer koozie. We got all 14 SEC teams represented with their own unique beer koozie. We'll send you free of charge. But that's going to do it for this episode of the show. We'll catch you on the next one.